What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Really excited for this one. Something I've been looking forward to for a long time. We're going to chop up a couple of quarterbacks coming in with somebody who talks quarterbacks for a living. So we're going to do that next on Locked On Badgers. Really excited for this one. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, and we're going to get right into this one because we have Crissy Froyd joining us, one of the up-and-coming stars in the media world for college football, covers Mississippi State, Tulane, has seen her work on Sports Illustrated, NBC, USA Today. Crissy, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And I wanted to get you on because I was looking up when Tanner Mordecai, and it's awesome to have you on, by the way. You're being very gracious with your time. When Tanner Mordecai committed to Wisconsin, I saw a podcast that you had done about him, and you said some incredibly brilliantly simple things in that podcast. I was like, yes. And the first thing you said was people are so dismissive of quarterbacks from air raid systems, and you still have to be a good quarterback to get those stats. Can you kind of go a little deeper into that, please?
Yeah, I think what people kind of look at is the fact that this is such a simple offense. I mean, the majority of offenses that are heavily founded on the air raid and air raid concepts, they usually only run about 10 plays and they're about 2 words long. And I think people get a little bit wary of that. But at the end of the day, there's so much responsibility that falls on the quarterback, who essentially toward the end of their career becomes the offensive coordinator on the field. And whenever you're throwing the ball around that much, it's really simple. And I don't understand why more people don't get it. But if you can't throw the ball well, you're simply not going to succeed in this system. If your trigger time is not on, you're not going to succeed in this system because it's all about execution. So I think that our quarterbacks in this system execute just about better than anybody else does.
And then let's talk about Tanner specifically a little bit. You talk about trigger time, executing in this system. He executes in this system. Talk a little bit more about maybe his year last year, and what did you think about the fit going to Wisconsin and going into that Phil Longo system for Mordecai?
Yeah, I think that 10 touchdowns in a single game says a lot, and he did that. I mean, it was a huge record that he set, and I think that he's still got some shortcomings. I think he just leans into his arm a little bit too much, but I mean, this is a guy also that has athletic ability and a very athletic build, so I think that he did a good job for the most part. His downfield accuracy is still a little bit streaky. I did talk to him about that, and he said that it's something that he's looking to get up, but something that he feels like him, and not only him, but SMU as a whole, did a much better job of this season. And so he goes into a system with Phil Longo, who is an air raid guy. I mean, I worked with Sam Howell before as well. And the thing is that they don't really put a ton of emphasis on the lower body stuff. They're more focused on trigger time, like I mentioned earlier. And then also they have power run concepts. I mean, they use a lot of air raid passing plays, but Longo does not run a pure air raid system. I'm kind of curious as to how that's going to work out for Mordecai, just because of kind of this sense of underrated athletic ability that he does bring to the table. And I think he'll be able to utilize that a little bit more, maybe in some of the ways that we saw them use Sam Howell at UNC.
Did it surprise you a little bit that because he was going to go to the draft. That's what he had talked about his final year. SMU pulled back from that, went to Wisconsin. Did it surprise you a little bit that he came out of this draft class, or did it make sense to try to put more film in maybe a bigger environment like a Big Ten team?
Yeah, I mean, you think about the games like the Tulane game that weren't that great for him, and he did have some games where he was a little bit up and down and inconsistent. And just on top of that, and probably the feeling that he could do more just in this situation, I think it also comes down to the fact that we knew this before the season, that this was going to be a stacked quarterback class. And I think that he probably kind of sat down and realized that he was probably going to go undrafted. I mean, we saw people like Spencer Rattler who were also considering going to the draft. Now, Spencer never declared, but there was a report out there that he was given a 3rd round grade. And I think it's just kind of one of those situations where you look at it and you say, you know what, I'm kind of happy with some of the things I did this year, but I think that I can come back and that I can build on it and do better. And I think that's what Tanner Mordecai is doing. And I think that he thinks this change of scenery is going to help him do just that.
What do you think? Do you think it's going to work? Do you think he's a quarterback that's going to go into Madison and elevate his draft stock? Or do you think it's maybe kind of plateaued, or it could even get a little worse, maybe playing some of the tougher defenses?
Yeah, I like the way that Longo runs his system in relation to who Tanner Mordecai is as a quarterback. There are some Sam Howell-esque things about him. They're 2 very different players at the end of the day, but they're just in terms of the way they can be utilized in this particular system. I think that he's a quarterback that can do well in the system. So I think it remains to be seen. Like I said, with some of the ups and downs, I mean, some people thought this was going to be an early round quarterback or like early just ahead of the mid rounds or something like that. And people kind of stopped talking about that. And I think that that happened for a reason. So I think that he also knows too. I mean, going forward with this next draft class, it's not quite as deep. And I think that he has a chance to increase his stock. And I think that if nothing else, that it's at least going to stay the same that it is. So there's no harm and no foul done here.
One of the things you mentioned was the downfield accuracy is a little streaky, leans into his arm a little bit. Do you think that's more of a mechanical thing or a decision-making thing in terms of maybe not seeing it develop quick enough, or maybe, I mean, do you think that's more decision-making or more mechanics for him?
I think it's more mechanical. I think he did have some decision-making issues at times this season, but you'll notice too, especially when he's on the move, his mechanics kind of start to falter from time to time. So I think that's something he's got to get a little bit better at. But yeah, I would say that it comes down to mechanics. At the end of the day, consistent lower body mechanics are what quarterback overall accuracy comes down to anyway.
And I want to kind of finish up here because there's another quarterback we're going to talk about, another one that you have experience with. But I kind of want to finish up here with Phil Longo. You talked about his system. There are people also get into this idea that all air raid offenses are the same, everything, you spread it out. What is maybe a little different about Longo's vision of this?
I think it's the way that he utilizes the run game. I think that he's not an air raid purist in the sense that we're going to run passing plays and once in a blue moon run the ball. I mean, he does run his quarterback, knows what his quarterback brings to the table whenever they are more athletic. I mean, Sam Howell was a really gritty player, and I think that they utilized him correctly in that sense. So I think that it's more of that he adopts the passing concepts. He has appreciation for the passing concepts and overall mentality. But when it comes to the power run game and just utilizing the run game as a whole, it's something he does not shy away from and does quite a bit, honestly.
And that's something Wisconsin fans are excited to see. And he had, like you mentioned, success. There are a couple 1,000-yard running backs, definitely somebody who's going to lean into the personnel that he has. Coming up, we're going to talk about another quarterback that committed to Wisconsin and get Crissy's take on Braedyn Locke. But first, we have to take a very quick break for friends of our show. Our show today is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and information. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well. It's always the fastest and easiest way to find, your latest sports news, lines, trends, futures bets, live in-game betting. And it's something that I bet with my heart. I've talked about it. I bet I have the Niners winning the Super Bowl, the Suns winning the finals. I've talked about all this, and it's the place we go to for our betting at Locked On. Grab your mobile device, head to the website today. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I want to thank everyone again for tuning in. Definitely get Crissy back on the show. And where can people find your outstanding work? Because you are really all over the place now.
Yeah, I have been. I do a lot of SEC stuff on Saturday Down South. The Fan Nation Network on Sports Illustrated do a lot of their NFL draft stuff, which is going to pick up a lot more now that things have finally slowed down. And then do Mississippi State over there, and then Tulane at Crescent City Sports. So yeah, a little bit all over the place. I feel like I've kind of been everywhere at this point.
And on lots of podcasts as well. So definitely recommend everyone go check out Crissy's work. It's phenomenal. She does a great job of, as I said earlier, simply brilliant stuff that is simple, and that's sometimes the best stuff that we can get. I want to talk about, and you're obviously kind of embedded in Mississippi State as well, running the Fan Nation side, Mississippi State. Braedyn Locke just committed to Wisconsin. What can you tell us about the former Mississippi State quarterback?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Braden, he didn't see any on the field time. So there's just so many question marks. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school in Rockwall, Texas, had a lot of success in Texas high school football, which I think speaks volumes because I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and did some high school football there for a while. And it is not easy to succeed there. It is probably the most competitive state that exists as far as high school football goes. So I think that he was being developed in the air raid offense. So there's some of those kind of the same traits of air raid quarterbacks he's going to bring. But I think at the end of the day, just without him having any experience on the table yet, that there's a decent amount of upside, but there's also a lot of questions that are going to be answered in the coming years. But I think that it's a good thing for him to be in a somewhat similar system to what he was in before, and then to have an older, more veteran presence as a quarterback that's the projected starter now, to kind of learn under, to kind of watch him perform in that system. So I think he's going into a good situation. I think with everything being so up in the air at Mississippi State and the notion that they're probably going to move away from the air raid offense, that this was in his best interest.
Was there a feeling inside the program regarding Locke, maybe about his upside? Was that a player that you think 2 or 3 years down the road? There are other quarterbacks, younger quarterbacks on the roster as well. Another one entered the portal from Mississippi State, but was he looked at as maybe the future quarterback there?
Honestly, I would say no. And the reason why I say that is because Mississippi State just landed a huge prospect in Chris Parson. Will Rogers is returning for another year. And then you have Sawyer Robertson, which there have been some mixed opinions about him. But I think when it comes down to him and Locke just head to head, that a lot of people got the sense that Sawyer Robertson had more upside and that he had the better chance of starting in the system at some point if he ever got the chance to between those two. So I think at a time, I mean, whenever he originally committed to Mississippi State and all that, there was excitement just because of the way he had performed on the Texas high school stage. But I think that this, at the end of the day, was a stacked quarterback room. And that when you look at kind of the timeline on when these people are leaving, who's probably going to start, who's expected to be better than the other one, you can kind of see a situation where maybe Braedyn Locke's sitting there on year 4 and is having some regrets. And so I think that's why he and Sawyer Robertson have played a role into why they ended up pulling the trigger there.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talked a little bit about Mordecai's fit into Longo's system. You know, Locke is a little different. He's a little shorter. He's probably not quite as mobile. How does he fit into what Phil Longo is looking to implement in Wisconsin, do you think?
I think that whenever we look at him, that it's more pure passing ability that we see. And obviously, he's still a younger quarterback. So that's even something that's going to have to develop. But I think he's a quarterback that can do well with those passing concepts. He's already familiar with them. And then as time goes on, we're going to see just more of who he truly is as a quarterback, just because it's so difficult. I mean, he didn't see very much time in the spring game, didn't see any action on the field. And so whenever you consider all those things, you can only kind of look at what you saw in high school and just consider the fact that this is still a younger player and maybe they surprise you and maybe it works out for him down the road. But I think that it's a good situation to go into as a younger quarterback with a system that's similar to the one that you came into with a quarterback like Tanner Mordecai around. And I think that it was one of the better fits for him that was available as far as schools interested in a transfer quarterback.
And that kind of leads into my next question. Coming into a quarterback room that also landed Nick Evers, the Oklahoma transfer, did it surprise you, or does it surprise you in general to see 2 4-star quarterbacks from the same class transfer to a school? And who, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but do you see a player that out of Evers and Locke that maybe you would think has a higher upside or a better chance to maybe start down the road?
Yeah, I would personally take Braedyn Locke, but I think that's just me because I've been around him. But I think it's also good to have all of this competition. I mean, there's still some unknowns in different ways about every single guy that we just mentioned here. And I think it's just a matter of figuring out how things go down the line. I think that they have their guy in Tanner Mordecai, who's probably going to be the best out of all of them just out of the gate. But I think it's going to be interesting just to watch how that develops. And I think that he's got guys that are suitable for the things that he likes to run. It's just a matter of who's going to pan out over the other. But I also think it's important whenever you have new coaches coming into a place, obviously Luke Fickell's over there now, to have all these quarterbacks to just evaluate and just to create competition at the end of the day, because that was one thing that Mike Leach always harped on is, I mean, it seemed like we had a million quarterbacks here all of the time. Half of them were never going to see the field, and you kind of got this sense of it, but breeding competition and having several guys in that room to kick the tires on is really a good thing, especially going forward in a state of transition like this.
Hey, Chrissy, I want to finish up here. And again, very, very appreciative of your time. It's awesome and it's very insightful. We say this on the show all the time that we run out of time before questions with the great guests. Certainly in that category. Did it surprise you from a national standpoint, someone who, as you said, you cover a lot of different aspects of college football, to see Luke Fickell go to Wisconsin and then to see all these quarterbacks come there? Did it surprise you? Does it feel like Wisconsin maybe outkicked its coverage a little bit there?
Yeah, I think that he was a really big hire for Wisconsin. I mean, you think about the success that he had with Cincinnati whenever they made the college football playoff, and then what he was able to do with players like Desmond Ridder. And I think that this season didn't fully go exactly the way that they wanted it to. And I think that kind of the make or break time came down to that Tulane game and not making it to the conference championship and all of that. And so I think that kind of had an impact as far as whenever coaches go to explore other options. I think it was just a very big domino effect as far as all of that goes. But I think that Wisconsin definitely landed a pretty big fish and got kind of lucky to have someone like that over there. And I think that if they have the right pieces in place, they already have a coach who has proven that he can get to the biggest stage of college football. So I think it's going to be a very interesting storyline to watch.
And I mentioned before the show, there's still time to jump on the bandwagon. Those seats are filling up quick, but you're welcome to join. Last question here, just as someone who does all this for a living, you follow quarterbacks intensely, and you interact with fans of teams. What is one thing fans tend to, I would say, overlook or not pay enough attention to when evaluating quarterbacks? When we're looking at quarterbacks, what do we not pay attention to enough?
The rest of the entire team. And I say that on purpose just because there have been so many quarterbacks that I've done work with journalism wise, like Michael Pratt from Tulane was one of those. And whenever I said that he had the potential to be an early round prospect or could eventually be a Heisman candidate, everyone thought I was crazy because they went 2-10 and had a lot of other issues across the board. I think he completed like 56% of his passes. But once they fixed the offensive line and once the receiving core got better and they made a change at offensive coordinator, I mean, you watch and you see what happened. You had the most remarkable turnaround in college football history. I think that he did improve some in his own right, but I think a lot of it came down to finally having everything he needed around him in all the right ways. And so I think there's a lot of people that will look at the stat line and will just kind of neglect all the other things that are going on, because at the end of the day, I mean, we sit here and watch football all the time, but playing quarterback is hard. And playing quarterback on the college football stage, especially going up against really big programs, and especially when you get to the championship stage, is not easy whatsoever.
That's an excellent answer. She is Chrissy Freud. We're going to put all the ways to find her excellent work into the show when we post it. Chrissy, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.